New York, 1965. The city felt ready to explode. The civil rights movement was shaking America to its core, and in Harlem, that tension hung thick in the air like a storm waiting to break. And right at the eye of it all stood Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. To the police, he was trouble. A street boss with a tight grip on the numbers game and Harlem's underworld. But to the people living there, Bumpy wasn't just a gangster. He was complicated. A shield. A man who stood when the world tried to make him kneel. But to Julian Westbrook, Bumpy was something else entirely. A pest. A headline. And a problem he planned to solve on live TV. Westbrook was the shining face of New York news, polished, sharp. Always behind his polished mahogany desk, speaking calmly to millions every night. His voice reassured me. His jawline didn't move when he smiled. And his words, always smooth, often carried a sting. He was the kind of man who didn't throw punches in the street. He used questions instead, sharp, loaded ones. He believed. He was better than any man who didn't look like him. And he never felt the need to hide that belief. The idea was his. His show was losing viewers. Younger reporters were going into the streets, telling stories from the front lines. And Westbrook? He needed a spectacle. So he pitched it. Bring Harlem's king into the studio. Drag him into the spotlight. Make the myth bleed under hot lights. He called it a public service. A hard look at organized crime. But in private, scotch in hand, Westbrook didn't pretend. I'll break him, he told his producer. Push him till he snaps. Let the world see what he really is. Then the cops will have the green light to put him away for good. When the invitation reached Bumpy's apartment at Lenox Terrace, his inner circle all said the same thing. Don't go. They smelled a setup. Westbrook wasn't offering a handshake. He was offering a stage, a rigged one. One where he held the mic, the cameras, the edit. Whispers, Bumpy's closest man, tried. Again. His voice was low, his face tight. You step into that studio, you play by his rules. He'll twist your words. Make you look like a fool. Bumpy sat quietly, reading the invitation. Heavy card, neat font. The kind of thing used for weddings or warnings. He took a slow pull from his cigar. He knew Whispers was right. It was a trap. But Bumpy had walked through traps his whole life and torn most of them down from the inside. He also knew this. Saying no would look like fear. And Harlem didn't follow a man who looked scared. I'm going, Bumpy said finally. Voice. Calm. He thinks I'm some clown from the streets. Doesn't know I read Nietzsche. Doesn't know I play chess. He looked at Whispers and nodded. Let him set his trap. I'll bring the bait. The day of the interview came cold and sharp. Wind whipped through the avenues, slapping faces and sneaking under collars. Bumpy dressed like a man heading into battle. A charcoal gray suit tailored in Italy, flawless fit. A clean white shirt crisp, a dark red silk tie. Fedora set just right. He studied his reflection. Didn't see a thug. Didn't see a criminal. What he saw was a leader. A man who could walk into any room in the city and make it his. The ride from Harlem to Midtown felt like crossing into a different world. Past 110th Street, everything changed. Brick row houses gave way to steel towers. The music disappeared. The rhythm changed. Now it was briefcases and cold stares. Silent elevators. Expensive shoes. When the black Cadillac rolled up to Rockefeller Center, the first wall hit fast. The doorman stood stiff, gold braid on his jacket, eyes locked on Bumpy. He didn't speak. Didn't smile. Didn't reach for the door. He just opened it slowly and stepped aside. No good evening. No respect. Just a silent warning. You don't belong here. Bumpy didn't flinch. He stepped out, fixed his hat, and walked through the front doors like he owned them. His men followed, quiet and sharp, The lobby felt like a temple. Marble floors, gold fixtures, footsteps echoing between suits and secretaries. Every glance said the same thing: they weren't welcome. But Bumpy didn't come here for welcome. Signs. He came to remind the city. You don't need permission to stand tall. When Bumpy stepped inside, the room shifted. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Eyes locked onto him. It wasn't common to see a black man walk through those doors unless he was pushing a mop or carrying coffee. But this man wasn't carrying anything except himself. Wearing a suit worth more than the security guards. Yearly pay, walking with quiet power. Bumpy Johnson challenged every unspoken rule in that building. At the front desk, a young woman greeted him. Her smile was tight, her eyes unsure. "Mr. Johnson," she said quietly, "Mr. Westbrook is expecting you. But security will need to check you." 2 guards moved in. Large, ex-cops. The kind who didn't speak much, just stood close and waited. One, red-faced and thick-necked, stepped right into Bumpy's space. Arms out, he gave a short nod. Standard check. Nat Pettigrew, Bumpy's man, stepped forward ready. But Bumpy raised a hand. That was enough to stop him. Then Bumpy turned, calm as ever, and looked the guard dead in the eye. He didn't lift his arms. He didn't move. He just held the stare. And the guard blinked. "I'm a guest of Mr. Westbrook," Bumpy said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I was invited. I'm unarmed. My men are unarmed. But if you touch me, I'll walk out. And tonight, 3 million people will stare at an empty chair. By tomorrow, you'll be out of a job if you're lucky." The guard paused. He glanced at the receptionist, who had turned pale. He looked at the clock. The show was live in 40 minutes. If the guest left, Westbrook would explode. The guard stepped back. His face burned red. "This way," the receptionist said, quickly stepping from behind the desk. They were led down long carpeted hallways, lined with portraits, white faces only. Anchors, politicians, celebrities. Each one staring down like they owned the building. Behind open doors, writers sat in clouds of cigarette smoke, typing fast. But as Bumpy passed, hands froze, heads turned. Whispers followed them like a shadow. "That's him. The gangster. The killer." The green room was waiting, small. Beige walls, a bowl of old fruit on a plastic table. Nothing else. No flowers, no comfort. Just a message. Bumpy got the message. This wasn't a welcome. It was a reminder. A signal that he didn't belong. That he was being tolerated, not invited. He didn't sit. He stood in the center of the room, hands calm, eyes scanning the walls. 10 minutes later, the door opened. In walked Julian Westbrook. On screen, Westbrook looked polished. In person, he looked polished and smug. Hair perfect, teeth gleaming, cologne heavy. He didn't enter to greet someone. He entered like he was walking into a cage. "Mr. Johnson," he said. "No handshake, no warmth, just distance. Glad you came. Honestly, we had a backup segment on the botanical gardens ready. Didn't think you'd have the nerve." I've never been accused of lacking nerve, Mr. Westbrook," Bumpy replied, cool and steady. Westbrook gave a dry chuckle. "The streets are one thing. This is national television. Whole different game. Rules here. Decency. Order." He stepped closer. His tone changed, condescending, like he was giving instructions to a child. "We're going to talk about Harlem," Westbrook said. "About the numbers, the violence. I expect real answers. No street slang. No jive talk. Speak clearly. Our viewers aren't used to your dialect. Try to articulate. We don't want to subtitle you." It was sharp. Dressed up like production advice, but it cut deep. A quiet insult. Westbrook wasn't hiding it, he was calling Bumpy uneducated. Beneath him, but Bumpy didn't blink, no anger, no frown. He looked at Westbrook like someone watching a bug crawl across a table. "I'll do my best to be understood, Bumpy," said. He used Westbrook's first name on purpose, Julian. That one word shifted the air. Westbrook's eye twitched. "Mr. Westbrook," he snapped. "On air, it's Mr. Westbrook." "We'll see," Bumpy replied, eyes steady. For a moment, Westbrook just stared, searching for emotion. Anything. He found none. So he scoffed, turned, and walked out. 5 minutes to air. Don't be late. The door closed behind him. Nat, who had been silent all this time, clenched his fists. "Let me knock him out," he growled. "Just once. He won't talk so smooth." Without teeth, Bumpy adjusted his cufflinks. "No," he said. "That's what he wants. The brute. The stereotype. If I yell, he wins. If I swing, he wins." He paused. "Tonight, we don't fight with fists. We fight with truth, and truth cuts deeper than any punch." A knock at the door. A stage manager, young and nervous, stood in the frame. "Mr. Johnson, we're ready for you." Bumpy nodded. Then walked out. The hallway ended in light. The studio floor opened up like a theater stage. Giant cameras on wheels. Boom mics hanging overhead like birds of prey. Heat pouring from studio lamps. And beyond all that rows of seats, an audience of 300. Almost all white, silent, watching. All of them looking for one thing. The man they'd heard stories about. The man from Harlem. The myth in a suit, Westbrook, was already seated behind his desk, flipping his notes, and the moment had finally arrived. Westbrook looked composed, like the king of his castle. He sat in a deep leather chair, polished and padded. Across from him, a plain wooden chair with no cushion. Another quiet message: comfort for the host, discomfort for the guest. Bumpy walked onto the set. His steps echoed against the studio floor. The audience fell silent, eyes locked on him. He reached the chair, sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and folded his hands neatly. He looked relaxed, calm, regal. A makeup artist rushed in to dab powder on Westbrook's nose. She paused by Bumpy, holding out the sponge. "I'm fine, darling," Bumpy said, gentle but firm. "I don't wear a mask." Westbrook heard it. His jaw twitched. The countdown began. 30 seconds. Quiet on set. 20 seconds. The red lights blinked on. The cameras hummed. Finger pointed. "Showtime." "Good evening," Westbrook said smoothly, his voice switching to the familiar tone trusted by millions. "I'm Julian Westbrook, and this is City in Focus. Tonight, a rare and controversial segment. We're taking you into the heart of Harlem, a world of shadows, vice, and fear. And joining us, the man some call its mayor, others its disease, Mr. Ellsworth Johnson. Or as the streets call him, Bumpy." He turned toward Bumpy, his face shifting into performance mode. "Mr. Johnson," he said, wasting no time. "Thanks for being here, though I should probably check my wallet first." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A cheap shot. A tired stereotype. Westbrook smiled, proud of himself. He believed he had drawn first blood. Bumpy didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. He waited for the room to quiet down. "You're welcome to check your wallet, Mr. Westbrook," Bumpy said evenly. "But I suspect you'll find that the ones robbing the poor in this city aren't in Harlem. They're the ones sitting in banks." Downtown, the audience went still. The laughter died quick. Westbrook blinked. "Very clever," he said, brushing it off. "But let's look at the facts. You claim to be a businessman, a voice for your community. Yet the police say something else. They say you run a numbers racket, that you bleed Harlem dry, that you take grocery money from struggling families to fund Italian suits. How do you justify that? He motioned toward Bumpy's clothes. Bumpy leaned in slightly calm. The numbers game, Mr. Westbrook, is the poor man's stock market. Wall Street gambles with billions every day. And when they lose, the government hands them a lifeline. But when a woman in Harlem plays 10 cents on a number to keep her lights on, the police raid her apartment. He paused. Why is it a business? Downtown, but a crime uptown? Because it's illegal, Westbrook snapped, and because it leads to violence. You fuel the murders, the shootings, the fear. Are you denying that men have died on your orders? I'm denying that I caused the violence, Bumpy replied, still steady. Violence in Harlem doesn't start with me. It starts with poverty, with desperation, with systems that treat black men like ghosts unless they're cleaning floors. He met Westbrook's eyes. You want to talk blood? Let's talk about the landlords who ignore broken heaters in January. Let's talk about cops who rough up kids for walking home. I didn't create this jungle, Mr. Westbrook. I just learned how to survive in it. Now Westbrook was unsettled. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Bumpy wasn't sweating. He wasn't angry. He was composed. And he was turning the spotlight around. Westbrook made a choice. He dropped the mask. You speak a lot about society, he said, voice tightening. But let's be real. You're a parasite. You poison your own neighborhood. You sell empty promises. And let's not pretend you're not an educated man. You didn't come from a university. You came from a prison. You're a thug with a vocabulary. Do you actually believe you can sit here and teach me about economics? That was the cut. The insult meant to land. He'd thrown it with force, dressed up in big words, but the meaning was plain. You're beneath me. The tension in the studio thickened. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. The audience leaned forward, waiting. They wanted the snap, the yell, the threat, but Bumpy gave them silence. He looked at Westbrook. Let the moment stretch. Let it grow uncomfortable. Then, softly, I don't have a Harvard degree, Mr. Westbrook, but I do have one from Sing Sing and from the streets where you wouldn't last 10 minutes. He spoke slowly. As for reading, I've read more books in my cell than you've likely read in your entire career. You read teleprompters. I read history. He paused just enough. And history teaches one clear lesson. Men like you always believe they run the world right up until the world changes. Westbrook flushed. Pink crept up his neck. He could feel control slipping from his hands. This wasn't the script. This wasn't the ending he planned. He realized something dangerous. He had underestimated Bumpy Johnson. Now, with his back against the wall, Westbrook reached for his last weapon. The question he had saved. The one he was sure would break him, and he decided to fire it now. Westbrook had one goal left. Destroy him. He leaned in, his voice soft but sharp. It came dressed as concern, but it carried a blade. Let's talk about your family, Bumpy. Let's talk about your daughter. You dress her up like royalty. You send her to schools that don't want her. But no matter how many ribbons you tie or how much money you spend, the world still sees her for what she is. He paused just long enough to make the moment sting. They see her as the daughter of a criminal, of a man pretending to be something he's not. The words floated in the air like smoke from a match, cold, heavy. Westbrook smiled. You think you can buy her out of who you are? You think money scrubs away blood? The room stopped breathing. Even the crew went still. What had just been said didn't belong to journalism. It wasn't an interview anymore. It was personal. Deeply personal. Westbrook had crossed a line you don't come back from. He sat back in his chair, lips curled ever so slightly. He had said what he came to say. And now he waited for the explosion. He expected the rise, the shout, the swing. He waited for Bumpy Johnson to become the man he thought he was, but Bumpy didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. What came over him wasn't calm, it was silence sharpened to a blade. Bumpy reached into his jacket. The guards shifted. One of them moved a hand toward his belt, but Bumpy didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a silver case. He opened it slowly, took out a match, struck it. The flame flickered for a second, then held steady. He lit a cigar, took a long pull, and exhaled. The smoke drifted across the table, between them, through the lights. It wrapped around Westbrook's face like a veil. Then, Bumpy leaned in. His voice dropped low enough to feel. "You made a mistake, Julian." He said the name like a sentence. "You thought I came here to impress you. You thought I needed your approval. But you forgot one thing." He smiled, not wide, not warm, but steady. "You forgot that I don't play by your rules, and you forgot where live. Which means no one can stop what I'm about to say." He checked his watch. 3 minutes left? Good. That's enough. In the booth, Westbrook's producer was shouting into his headset, "Cut to break. Now." But the director, he kept the camera rolling. He knew what this was. It wasn't just television. It was reckoning. Back on set, Westbrook sat frozen, pale, still. He had opened the wrong door, and now he was trapped inside it. "You asked me about shame, Julian. Let me tell you something about shame." Bumpy paused, took another drag. The ash glowed bright. "And let me share a little secret your own network didn't tell you I knew." Westbrook's jaw twitched. "You want to know why you sit in that chair? Let's talk about that." He leaned back. The wooden chair beneath him meant to make him small looked suddenly like a throne. "You stood here and called me a predator, a thief, a parasite." Bumpy reached into his coat again. Westbrook tensed. But again, no weapon, just a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it out on Westbrook's desk, letting it rest there like a challenge. "It's a marker," Bumpy said. "A betting slip from a man in Hell's Kitchen. A man named S." Westbrook's lips parted. No sound came. "You know S, don't you?" Bumpy said. Now his voice shifted. He was speaking to the camera, to the audience, to America. "S is in the same business I'm in. He lends money. He watches people fall behind, and he offers them a hand for a price." He turned back to Westbrook. "But the people he helps? They're not grandmothers in Harlem. They're anchors. Politicians. Men with Jaguars and unpaid rent. You call what I do dirty. But you've sat at private poker tables at the plaza. You've dropped thousands at Saratoga. And when the debts piled up, you didn't go to a bank. You went to S." Westbrook opened his mouth. A dry sound escaped. "Stop." It was barely a whisper, but Bumpy wasn't done. "You said I poison my people with dreams. But you poison them with lies, with a smile, with a clean haircut. You stand behind your desk and pretend to be the voice of reason. You're not the voice of reason, Julian. You're the voice of comfort. Comfort for the people who don't want to see the truth." The red light on the camera kept burning, unblinking, broadcasting every word into living rooms. Across the country. In the booth, the producer's hand slammed the desk again. "Cut it now." But the director just shook his head. "This isn't news," he said. "This is history." Back on set, Bumpy sat still. Smoke curled around him. The room remained frozen. Westbrook had no comeback. He had started a war of words. But Bumpy had brought facts. Calm facts delivered like hammer blows. And now there was nowhere for him to run. "This is slander. I'll sue you." "Slander's a lie, Julian," Bumpy said, tapping a slip of paper. "This is dated last Tuesday. $50,000. That's what you owe us." He paused. "And you know what happens when a man like you can't pay a man like S?" He gets desperate. He looks for a way out, for a big story. Something that makes headlines. Something that convinces the network to give him a raise so he can settle his debt before someone settles it for him. The audience gasped. It wasn't just a clapback, it was a breakdown. Piece by piece, Bumpy was peeling away Westbrook's carefully polished image, exposing what lay beneath. You didn't invite me here to tell the truth about Harlem, Bumpy said, his voice now colder, sharper. You brought me here to save yourself. You thought if you humiliated me on live TV, turned me into a villain, you'd be crowned the hero. You'd get your bonus. You'd pay off us and you'd sleep a little easier. He leaned in. You're not a journalist, Julian. You're a gambler, a man who bet his future on tearing down mine. Westbrook was shaking now. His hands trembled. Sweat dripped down his temple, cutting through the powder on his face. He looked toward the camera, then back at Bumpy. His eyes were no longer angry, they were pleading. But he couldn't speak. Please stop. Please don't ruin me. He didn't say it, but the whole room heard it. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't known for mercy. He was known for justice. And Harlem's justice didn't bend. You brought up my daughter, Bumpy said. The room chilled. You asked if she's ashamed of me. You asked if my money could clean the skin off her back. Bumpy stood, slowly, with presence. He was taller than Westbrook now, towering over him. Calm, collected. He held up the betting slip, then dropped it onto Westbrook's lap. My daughter knows who I am, Bumpy said. She knows I keep my word. She knows I pay my debts. And she knows I've never sold my soul for a suit I couldn't afford. Bumpy leaned down, inches from Westbrook's face. The anchor could smell the cigar, the mint, and something else power. The kind you can't fake. My daughter sleeps soundly at night, Julian, Bumpy whispered. But your son, when he goes to school tomorrow, and the other kids ask him why his father is a fraud who owes money to the mob. He let the sentence hang. I wonder if he'll be ashamed of you. That was it. Westbrook broke. Cut the tiro. Feed, he screamed, voice cracking. Cut it now. He jerked backward in panic, his chair slipping out from under him. He landed hard on the floor, arms flailing, suit twisted, tie crooked. A titan reduced to a tantrum. Security. He howled, pointing a shaking finger. Get him out. Get him out now. The red light on the camera blinked off. The director finally cut, switching to a commercial for laundry detergent, but it was too late. 3 million people had seen Julian Westbrook fall apart. They'd seen Bumpy Johnson rise not as a myth, not as a menace, but as a man who wouldn't bow. Chaos broke in the studio. The stage manager ran forward. Security guards finally moved, stepping onto the set with tense hesitation. Mr. Johnson. The lead guard barked, though his tone had lost its edge. You need to leave. Bumpy didn't look at him. He looked at Westbrook, still sprawled on the floor, struggling to get up. He reached into his pocket one last time. Westbrook flinched hard, expecting a gun, a blade, anything. But Bumpy only pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He let it flutter down. It landed gently on Westbrook's chest. For the cab ride home, Bumpy said, since Sal's taking your car. He turned and walked away, cuffed sleeves, tie straight, head high. From the wings, Nat Pettigrew and Whispers stepped out like sentinels. Together, they moved as one, a wall of quiet force cutting through the studio. Like a blade, the audience had been frozen for nearly an hour. But now they began to move, slowly at first. Then all at once, standing to their feet, there were no cheers. No clapping. Just silence, mixed with awe. They had come expecting to see a monster. They had seen something else entirely. As Bumpy crossed the marble lobby, the atmosphere had shifted. The receptionist didn't speak. She simply stared, stunned at the doorman who once hesitated, now scrambled forward, rushing to open the revolving door like his life depended on it. "Have a good night, Mr. Johnson." Hestmered. Bumpy paused, glanced at him. "You too, son," he said softly, "and try not to judge a book by its cover. Sometimes the cover's expensive, but the pages are blank." They stepped into the cold night. The wind still howled down 6th Avenue, but Bumpy didn't feel it. He felt heat. Quiet, personal heat. The kind that comes with a clean wind. They slid into the back of the Cadillac. The door shut with a final thunk, sealing the world out. For a long moment, no one said a word. The car rolled north. Streetlights passed in blurs. Then Nat broke the silence with a low whistle. "Bumpy," he said, shaking his head. "I've seen you do some cold things. Break fingers. Call hits. But that," he trailed off, "that was murder without a touch." In the front, Whispers chuckled dry and raspy. "Did you see his face when you dropped that marker? I thought he was going to pass out right there on the floor." He imitated Westbrook's panic, high-pitched and cracked. "Cut the feed. Cut the feed." Bumpy didn't laugh. He just stared out the window, smoke curling from his cigar, and Harlem, steady and waiting, rolled back into view. Bumpy lit a fresh cigar. The flame flickered, steady and quiet. "He did that to himself," he said calmly. "I just held up the mirror." Nat shook his head. "Men like Westbrook think they're untouchable." "They build towers on sand," Bumpy replied, smoke curling from his lips. "They think money and fame make them immune. They think looking down on us is their birthright. But gravity doesn't care about privilege. The higher the lie, the harder the fall when someone pulls the truth out from Favama. Under it." Nat glanced at the folded paper. "How'd you get the marker?" "S keeps his books tight." Bumpy smiled in the shadows. "He does. But his turf sits close to ours. Last week, he had a problem. A union guy giving him trouble. I handled it. He tapped ash into a tray. When I saw Westbrook's name on that invitation, I made a call. Asked if our friend had any outstanding liabilities. He grinned. S was more than happy to trade the debt for peace with me." "So you bought his debt?" Whispers asked from the front. "I bought his soul," Bumpy said. "And tonight I cashed it in." As the Cadillac crossed 110th Street, the city changed again. Midtown's cold edges melted into Harlem's pulsates. Rhythm, its breath, its struggle. Despite the hour and the cold, people were out, on corners, on stoops, eyes wide, watching the car roll down Lenox, and then they started cheering. A group of boys outside a pool hall raised their fists in the air. Some clapped. Some just nodded silently. With respect, they had seen the broadcast. They had seen one of their own walk into the lion's den and walk out with the lion's teeth. For years, the press had told them they were nothing. Tonight, someone had shown the world they were wrong. Bumpy watched from the back seat. He didn't wave. He wasn't a candidate. He wasn't campaigning. He was a king returning from a crusade, but his eyes softened. He had done it for himself, yes, for his name, but also for Elise, and in doing so, he had handed Harlem something rare, a quiet, necessary victory. When they reached the apartment, Elise was waiting. She was on the couch, TV still on, though the screen now played a rerun sitcom, something safe and forgettable, hastily filling the dead air Westbrook had left behind. She stood when he entered, wearing her nightgown, hair wrapped, eyes red, but no longer crying. She looked at him, at her father, the man the city called a criminal, the man the anchor called a savage. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You made him hate you." Bumpy took off his coat and passed it to Nat, who quietly slipped into the kitchen. He walked over to his daughter. "I looked at her so much like her mother," The one face he would cross fire for. He already hated me, baby girl, Bumpy said gently. He hated me before I ever walked in that building. Hated me because I exist. What I did tonight wasn't about making him hate me, he continued. It was about making him respect you. Elise's voice trembled. He said awful things. About me. About us. He said what he thought, Bumpy said softly, and now the whole world has seen it. They saw his hate, and then they saw his fear. You can't kill hate, Elise. It grows like weeds. But you can drag it into the light. And tonight, Julian Westbrook learned what happens when you throw mud from inside a glass house. The phone rang, sharp and loud. Bumpy looked at it. He didn't need to answer. He knew who it was. Politicians, network heads, the other bosses, everyone wanting to know if what they'd seen had really just happened. He let it ring. He sat down next to his daughter on the couch. Turn that off, he said, nodding to the TV. She clicked it off. The silence was soft, comforting. Did you really pay for his cab? Elise asked, a small smile flickering across her lips. Bumpy chuckled. I did. A man should always be kind to the less fortunate. The fallout came fast. By sunrise, Julian. Westbrook wasn't just out of a job, he was a ghost. The network issued a cold, clipped statement. Resignation due to personal health matters. His name was pulled from the building. His face taken off the promos. His desk emptied by noon, and the gambling debt? It hit every front page. The Post, the Daily News, even the Times. Westbrook's public image shattered. The golden boy of journalism was now the hypocrite who called out others while hiding his own dirt. If Bumpy had laid a hand on him, Westbrook would have been a martyr. But Bumpy hadn't touched him. He had used the truth, and the truth made him untouchable. Westbrook lost his apartment, his car, his marriage. Within a week, his wife moved their children to her parents' estate in Connecticut. He tried to sue. No lawyer would take the case. Too risky, too public. No one wanted to face Bumpy Johnson in open court. 3 weeks later, Bumpy sat in the Flash Inn eating a steak. The place was alive, warm with laughter, thick with cigarette smoke, and filled with Harlem's finest. On the jukebox, Coltrane played. Nat sat across from him, shaking his head. Bumpy, he said, leaning back. I've seen you do cold things, real cold. But that, he gave a low whistle. That was something else. Whispers was still chuckling across the table. You should have seen his face when you dropped that marker. The man looked like he was going to melt into the carpet. He mimicked Westbrook's voice, high and panicked. Cut the feed. Cut the feed. They all laughed deep, knowing. Laughs. Bumpy didn't say much. He just sat quietly, listening, watching, thinking that the music played on, and Harlem, for a brief moment, felt like it had won. Whispers stepped inside, shaking off his umbrella. Rain slid down his coat. He spotted Bumpy in the corner booth and made his way over, sliding into the seat across from him. You hear about Westbrook? Whispers asked, helping himself to a drink. Bumpy didn't look up from his plate. He calmly cut his steak. I don't read the gossip columns. Wasn't in the papers, Whispers said. Saw him myself. Downtown, near Port Authority. Bumpy paused, fork halfway to his mouth, and he looked rough, Whispers continued, suit all wrinkled. Beard coming in, eyes twitching. Tried to get in a backroom card game behind a deli. They tossed him out, said his credit wasn't welcome. Bumpy chewed slowly, swallowed, took a sip of his red wine. Did he mention me? He asked. Whispers shook his head. No, but he was looking over his shoulder like you were already there. Waiting for someone to finish the job, Bumpy said quietly. Whispers nodded. Bumpy sat back. There's no job left to finish. He looked out the rain-dotted window at Harlem streets alive even in the storm. People moved fast, heads down, coats pulled tight, hustling, surviving. A man like that, Bumpy said, needs a spotlight to breathe. Take away the chair, the camera, the applause, ... and he disappears. What's left isn't a man. It's just a shadow haunting a city that forgot his name, Whispers grinned. Still, it was something to see. The boys keep talking about it. That line, my daughter sleeps soundly. Does your son? He whistled, cut straight through him. You could feel it. Bumpy wiped his mouth, placed the napkin neatly beside his plate. His eyes never left the window. He asked the wrong question, Bumpy said. He asked if my daughter was ashamed. He paused. He should have asked if I was afraid. Whispers leaned in, and if he had? Bumpy turned to him. His voice was calm, his eyes sharp. I'd have told him the truth. He leaned forward. Slightly. I'm not afraid of the police. I'm not afraid of the Italians. And I'm sure as hell not afraid of a man behind a desk with a mic. He straightened his tie. The only thing I fear in this world is my daughter growing up thinking she has to bow her head to anybody. And as long as I'm breathing, that world doesn't get to exist. Whispers nodded slowly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy but clear. Bumpy signaled the waiter. Let's go, he said, rising, placing his fedora on his head. Numbers don't run themselves. And I heard S might need a new client over in Hell's Kitchen. He smirked. Seems there's an opening in the broadcasting business. They stepped out into the Harlem night. Rain misted in the glow of the street lamps. Cars passed, music thumped faintly from a bar down the block. The King of Harlem and his shadow walked side by side, leaving behind the memory of Julian Westbrook, just a name fading into static, a man once seen as untouchable, now a ghost, a caution for anyone who ever mistook Bumpy Johnson's silence for weakness. The city would keep moving, fast as ever, but that night, in the airwaves and the alleyways, a message stayed burned into memory. You can challenge the king, but don't you dare insult the princess. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this story and want more, be sure to like the video and subscribe so you never miss a new Bumpy Johnson tale. More Harlem legends coming soon.